So let's talk about the reading process itself. Remember, there's 3 steps in the reading process: pre-read, read, and post-read. So what do we do in those stages? Well, let's talk about pre-read first. Okay, on home, on my lawnmower, I have a little red button. And I have to push that red button 3 times before I can start my lawnmower. Why do I have to do that? What does it do? Well, that little red button on my lawnmower primes my lawnmower. It puts a little gas in the carburetor, gets my engine ready to work. Well, we have to do the same things when we read. We have to prime our brain, get ourselves ready to read. So let's talk about the pre-read first. Remember, we've already talked about that you have a lot of information stored in your head about your background knowledge. Everything you've experienced is stored in there. Okay, well, we want to make that work for us. So some of the things that we do when we do a pre-reading helps us bring our brain to the reading event, helps us prime that pump. What happens when you come from work, or you come from a party, or you come from just hanging out with friends, and you sit down, you open your chapter, and you start to read? What's the first thing you see in the world? The reading process, pre-read, read, post-read, on my lawn, blah, 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 blah. Where's your brain still? Your brain has not come with you to your textbook yet. Your brain has not come to the reading event yet. It's thinking about work. It's thinking about the kids. It's thinking about the party. It's thinking about your significant other. It's doing something else. When we take a minute, like 2 or 3 minutes, to do a pre-read, it's going to help us focus our attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop. We're going to think about what we already know. We're going to use our text tools, those headings, the graphs, the charts, in our textbook to help us out. One of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to skim the chapter. We're going to look at the chapter and see what it's about, because what that does, it activates that background knowledge. Now remember, we said learning occurs when you make a connection between what you already know and new information. So we've got to activate what we already know. By skimming the chapter, we know something about it, even if it's not very much. Let's say I'm reading an anatomy and physiology textbook. I don't know a lot about anatomy and physiology, but let's say that I at least know that there are different types of muscles. Okay, well, that's a good place to start if I'm reading a chapter about muscle, or it can be even more simple. What if all I know about muscles is that you need them to move? Well, you know something then. So you can activate your background knowledge so you can make those connections, which we need to do when we learn. So you're going to skim. You're going to look at the headings. You're going to look at the graphs. You're going to look at all those text tools that we listed to activate your background knowledge, get an idea of what the chapter is going to be about. Then you're going to set a purpose. Why do you want to read this? We talked about the difference between, oh, I got to study this for a quiz, or truly wanting to learn, oh, I'm going to need to know this because that makes a difference in how much interest you have. The other thing that you're going to want to do, especially if you are having a hard time paying it or being interested in the chapter, because honestly, some textbooks, some materials, some chapters not as interesting as others, right? And how many times have you gotten to the bottom of a page and been like, oh, dang it, I have no idea what I just read? And then you end up wasting time having to reread the chapter. We don't want that to happen. So when we skim, we can activate that background knowledge. We can set a purpose. If we're having trouble doing those things, becoming interested in it, we can actually look at our headings and turn our headings into questions. Okay? So you can use those great questions that you were taught in English class. So again, if I'm reading an anatomy and physiology book, and my topic might be muscles of the body, my questions can be, well, what kinds of muscles are there? How do muscles work? How are muscles attached to other parts of our body? How do I move my muscles? Why does it matter if a muscle contracts, or how does that work? What are some diseases associated with muscles? When you turn those headings into questions, it helps your brain become more interested. We have what I like to call a bloodhound brain. What does a bloodhound brain do when it goes after a scent? Does it just go for a minute and then stop? Nope. A bloodhound brain follows that scent until it finds more information that it wants. Our brains are built like that too. So when we're skimming and activating background knowledge, and especially when we're asking questions, our brain can't help but go find the answer. That's how we're built. That's why babies are always putting things in their mouth. They're trying to gain information. They're trying to find answers. That's how our brains are built. So now, once we've done these things, and we're talking like 1 or 2 minutes. So I've taken a look. Oh, look. Here's a picture of a brain. Here's a picture of a textbook. Here's a list of the processes. I want to learn this information so that I can spend less time, I can spend more time with my kids instead of rereading my textbook because I don't understand. Well, let's see what it actually says. And then I start to read. I'm going to get more information out of it when I read this time. Which brings us to, what do we do when what's called active reading? That's the second step. Okay, so this is step 1. Active reading is step 2. Well, there's some steps. We call them PVRMC. We're going to talk about what each one of those things mean. P is predict. It's getting that active bloodhound brain again. Can you make a prediction? It doesn't have to be right. What do you think the chapter is going to be about? That's going to make your brain want to read it. Visualize. Can you picture what's happening in that chapter? That's going to help you stay interested. The R stands for relate. That's that connection again. What connection can you make between the new information and the old information? Make a connection. This is like, I remember learning about amoeba, and I remember thinking, oh, this is like my mom's Jell-O. So whatever it happens to be that can help you make a connection, you want to make that connection so that you're able to remember it better. And then monitor. That just means check your understanding. How are you doing? If something is not making sense, then you need to correct. That can be looking up additional information. It can be asking a question in class. It can go to see your instructor during office hours. Whatever you need to do to make sure that you understand the material. Lastly comes our post-read. This is the one that lots of people skip. But if you skip it, it's kind of like eating food without digesting it. You need to take time and effort to digest, to understand the information that you have read. So what do we do in a post-read? Well, there's lots of different examples. Remember, we're trying to digest the information. You can write a summary. You can answer the review questions. You can talk to somebody about it. Again, I had a student one time, and after she read a chapter, she would tell her dog a little summary about the chapter, and somehow just talking about it helped her process it, and her dog was a fabulous audience. So talk to somebody about it. You can also make note cards to help you remember. You can review your notes if you've taken notes along the way while you've read, or you can make notes. And there are probably lots of other things that you know about that you can do, that you could add to this list. Let me tell you a secret. So this is a secret that I wish every 4th grade teacher would tell their students. Because 4th grade is the first time that you're handed a textbook and said, hey, go read this chapter, but they don't tell you how to go read the chapter. Okay, so looking at our pre-read and our active reading and our post-read, here's the biggest secret. This shouldn't be a secret. Read your end of chapter summaries first. Read those review questions first before you actually read the chapter. Because when you're skimming and you look at those things, it's going to activate your background knowledge. It's going to help you set a purpose. It's going to get that bloodhound brain of yours to go look for the information. It's going to make it easier to do all those things when it's actually time to read. Then, after you read, go back and see if you can answer those questions now. Did you learn the material? If not, what do you need to do to learn the material? As a final thought here, I want you to think about how much money you have spent on your textbooks. How much money have you spent on your textbooks? On average, students usually say about $500. Sometimes in the sciences it can be $600. That's a lot of money. Even if it's $200, that's a lot of money. Was there something else that you could have done with that money instead? Probably. So make these textbooks work for you. You have spent a lot of money on the textbooks and on your education. Make those textbooks work for you. Use these strategies so that you can get more information out of that textbook when you decide to sit down and read it. And then a final thought, there's a quote that I actually just love, and it says, teachers can open the door, but you must enter. So we can provide the information, textbooks can provide the information, but you've got to actually put forth the effort and get that information out of the textbook. So the final assignment right now, write down one thing that you're going to do differently from now on when you sit down to read. It can have to do with the setting, or it can have to do with the reading process. What is the one thing you're going to do to make your textbooks work for you?